6, 5.
Hello and welcome to the U.S. Sailing Starboard Portal. Today we are excited to have Cameron Appleton and Tom Burnham from Quantum Racing and Quantum Sails to share with us a bit about what they've been doing with the team during the TP52 Super Series and to give us a really cool look into the analytics and other information that they're capturing during the racing and how they break that down via the Nord player for post-race debriefs. We'll be taking questions during the session, and so please be sure to put them into the YouTube chat window. And for now, Tom and Cameron, thank you for joining us, and it's off to you.
Thanks for having us.
Hi, Nathan. Thanks for having us. I mean, what you've been doing with US Sailing, the whole team, engaging all of us with many of your fantastic guests and presentations. We're excited to be part of this environment. You know, what this serves for us at Quantum Sails and using Quantum Racing as a platform, it sort of serves as a virtual or live scale wind test, full scale testing platform. And it's given us a chance to develop racing sails for our customers. And racing sails are sails that you can race with, accelerate, build speed, change modes, all those different sort of aspects that we look for in racing, holding tight lanes. We all want fast sails and we all want to go fast around the course, but we need to be able to put sails on our boats that we can race with. Tommy and I looked at, when we were asked to do this, looked at what sort of would be quite fun, and we come up with this cool little debrief that we think is highlights a really sort of technical race, a windy race that we did in Cape Town, and has many areas that you have to get right. And Tom can go through from his side how he sort of sees things and how he has to put everything in effect to present us with everything that we need to develop into the following day with.
Yeah, I think that the thing that's interesting, thanks Cam for the intro, what we're looking at is trying to process a whole lot of information in a short period of time to make it usable for the next day. And so it's quite interesting how quickly the technology of sailing has evolved and how accessible now cameras and recorders for voice recorders and recording data and putting all these things, getting all this data that we get and collect during a day of sailing can be quite daunting, because it's quite a lot of information in a short that comes from one day of sailing. And so being able to distill that information and use it for the next day, it's important to have a really good tool. And we're really lucky that through a guy named Jonas Witt, who works more directly with the Phoenix sailing teams, has developed this player and analytical software that really makes it a lot easier. And what we're able to do is at the end of the day, I can collect the different footage, the different feeds of an audio broadcast, a GoPro from on board the boat, drone footage, and then a different drone. We've got 2 different drones in the air on some days, but normally we have our one drone, a GoPro, and audio for sure. And then we have our data stream, which is all the data that gets collected from our instruments through the day. And being able to dump all these things into this one software, do a little bit of time sync and get it all to come out and have an easy way to navigate through a day of racing through quick scrolling through. You can see the different green lines. They're down here. The top green line is the audio feed. The second green line is the GoPro feed. And then we've got the drone footage underneath that. So I can always tell where there's drone footage, where we've got GoPro, where the audio is, and each white stripe in the lines down the bottom represent a tack or a jibe. And so I can quickly shift back and forth between different feeds and also have multiple screens up at the same time. So it's quite a useful tool. It enables me to turn a whole bunch of information into something useful within about 45 minutes from hitting the dock, which is great. So it's a little far cry from the days of VHF tapes and trying to discern things through a piece of wool and a handheld compass from the coach boat. So it's quite a nice tool. So I think what we were going to do is instead of trying to run through the actual player for this session, we've created a presentation that will play and be able to have some video, some audio, and some different pieces from the day. But to start it out, what we normally do is our first thing in the morning is we get together as a group and we look at forecasts for the race day. This is the forecast for that race day. So Cam, maybe talk us through a little bit about what you saw in the forecast that morning.
Yeah, so part of the plan is when we approach each day, like Tommy says, we have these fantastic tools, and it's all about just getting all the information that you can, piecing it together and using it how you may. Obviously, the interpretation is a big part of it, but when you're going in, they can forecast the southeasterly, which is the strong direction in Cape Town, and bends around Table Mountain. So if you look in the slides on the sort of right of the screen, you can really see the red reinforced line or a very narrow band. So we knew going into the day, the race committee made an earlier start, we knew that it was going to be an uprange day. So with that, we start sort of working out what our plan is exactly, all the rules of thumb, heavy air approach, sail choices, transfers, all these different things. Even do we hoist a kite after they warm up to go downwind, the risk reward there. But interestingly, in this forecast, they speak in the bottom where you've got geographical features. They talk about the flow into the bay and how it's slightly less breeze along the shore and very accelerated along the convergence line with the no wind zone and the wind. And that truly is a line, and we'll talk about that a little later. And you can see it in this map. So there's all these little bits that you can take out of the forecast, and we took out of the forecast into our plan for the day. And we go out there with a predetermined sort of notion on, we want to line up, we want to check this part of the course, and we want to just see how it lines up with the forecast.
Yeah, I think for anybody who's never been to Cape Town, it's quite dramatic when you look at those weather maps there on the bottom. It's pretty impressive how you can have 30 knots of wind, within a 3/4 of a mile of the shore, and then there's a line, and then there's absolutely no wind on the other side of that line. And it's pretty amazing how far downwind that shadow from Table Mountain goes. And it really shows up on those weather maps there, those high resolution weather maps. And we'll show you a photo later of how real that is and how striking it really is. It's quite impressive. It's something, if you've never been there before, that's impressive to see in real life. So I think we'll move on. Next thing we'll do is we'll show you some video from the start of the race, hopefully. There we go. So this is a video of the start of the race. So you can see we've got the drone footage on the left. We've got the tracks of all the boats on the right. And just to give a little bit of information on the tracker for this event was a little bit glitchy because where we were in that area of the bay in Cape Town, there wasn't very good cell phone coverage. So you can see that the boats are jumping around a little bit, and the ley lines are off as well because the tracker's working in true direction, where the boat compass is in magnetic. So there's about a 17-degree variation. So the ley lines and things like that on the tracker picture on the right are in true, which is a little bit different to what we're seeing on the boat. So just to give that a little bit of little information of a bit of a difference here. So we'll watch this, we'll listen to it. Cam can talk us a little bit through what he's talking about on the boat and what the plan was here going off the line.
I'm not sure how much of this that you can all pick up, but as you can see at the very bottom of the screen in the yellow number, you've got the line square to is 192. Michaeli's just yelled out 184. That's probably the wind direction. So right now we know that the pin's relatively favored, and our plan is right now is to start to windward of the group down the line, taking out the bias. As Tom rolls, I change the call and say happy to go all the way to the right of the fleet Ed. And Ed was able to execute that.
1 minute away from the line.
So, part of the sailing or the preparation and any strong breeze is just getting your ratio back to the line. It's really hard to kill. And killing slow and killing high or doing an extra attack in the last sort of dying seconds gets really risky. So part of our whole approach is being very conservative in the start and getting our distance back from the line and that ratio correct. So there's kind of a lot of focus on what distance you are from the line, and you can see the whole fleet's kind of in that same mode. They're all sort of stacked up on that same ladder rung, as we like to say.
And it's interesting here, if you can hear there's a little late change of plan to go behind Provezza, which I think is interesting, and it was a good call.
Yeah, I think when Professor came back, Michele's able to tell Ed that they're shy of ley line, so it's going to be very hard for them to shut us out at the boat. So it gives Ed that opportunity to use the space beyond Professor. So as you can see on the screen right now, you've got the time to the gun. Normally we can also see time to go, and we can look at different aspects in the ratios. So Michele's cool and burn time here, we're still burning a little bit.
And to kill still, it says. One thing I think is interesting to bring out too is just if you look at the crew here, Rodney in the pit is calling the time to the start, and Michele is calling the time to burn behind Ed and Cam. So having that geographic difference between the two different people helps differentiate what the numbers mean. So you can know that the time to the gun is coming from in front, and then know the time to burn is coming from behind you. It sort of helps with that, definition of labor, I guess you could call it.
And then don't forget, we've got Greg on the bow. So there's sort of 4 sort of inputs here. There's Ed, obviously, with the helm. He's deciphering everything that's being said to him. There's Michele with the time to kill, Rodney with the time, and Greg, or Foxy as he's known, he's sort of keeping an eye on the fleet and keeping our bow level or even. In this particular start, obviously we had a bit of a focus early on just shutting the door on Allegre and making sure Allegre couldn't really dictate us having to pull the trigger too early. And Ed did a good job, and we executed a pretty nice start. So that shows us we were 0.6 of a second back from the line, and now we're into the live instruments on the right. So we've come off the line in a 184, 180 wind direction. So that comes quite key later on in the race, which I'll talk about.
I think the other thing that's quite, now that we'll look back on it, well, everybody will see it, but it's pretty impressive that these guys that start last and tack at the boat, and this boat that's tacking right now, those guys are first and second at the top mark. And we'll show you now what that is, how that comes about. So the next thing is at the end of each day, I'll take a screenshot of the start at the gun time and send this out to the crew so they get that straight away, and shows exactly where all the boats were off the line at the gun time of the gun.
One of the things with the 52 fleet is everything's run off GPS time. So it's not based on the flag, it's based on the GPS time. And so we can set all our instrument watches and get the information pretty accurately that way.
Yeah, I think it's an important one. It's a feature that the class has changed in the class rules, that the horn, or the gun and the flags don't really matter. It's all about GPS time and the countdown from the race committee. And I think it just takes out a few variables when we're working in such low tolerances of times and how fast the boats are going across the line. So here's the cool picture. This is the shot that I think says a lot, and we'll let Cam talk through it, but it just shows you how light it is off to the right-hand side of that racetrack, and how big that wind shadow is. You can see that we're sailing there right to windward of Provezza with 22 knots of wind, and over on the other side of that red freighter, there's 0.
And as the line shows, it really is a clear line in the sand. And so, what we've done here prior to the start to build that start plan, and probably we're wondering how we come about with our plan and what we're thinking when we're trying to execute getting off the line, is we lined up before the start, and Platoon is our training partner, and we spend and share a lot with them, and we have access to each other's instruments. At the end of the day, we can really look through how we perform. But going the first beat, we worked the left, and we were to windward both ways, and it was interesting. We could hold on that warm-up being to windward of them, and then we lost a huge amount being to leeward. So what it did for me was it sort of showed a little bit of a description about how maybe the course was going to work, and what what would be the best way to approach the first beat. Now, we can't quite see it, but the beach is off to the left. That is well before ley line. And then the light air on the right is sort of also a scary place, because one thing we know is there's accelerated breeze down that sort of no wind line, but it can move in and out, and it can move 500 meters plus. So it's can move without warning. And then we know it's a little lighter on the left, and we can't quite get to ley line. So the time is shorter on starboard and allows us to maybe hold in a compromised position or up to windward and control when we then tack out and approach the last part of the beat. So that's sort of how we formulate the plan. We talk with Tom and the guys on the chase boat who are watching the whole thing. We sort of run through all the scenarios and the risk reward for each sort of position on the line. And then it's up to Michaeli, Ed and I to then go out and formulate that plan, and Ed and the rest of the team to execute it.
Yeah, nice one. So yeah, I think, so we come off the line here. We're to windward of the group, controlling all the boats to leeward. The boats have tacked and gone to the right. They're doing their thing, but we've got majority of the fleet is sort of in control. You know, not 100% controlled. A few of them should be able to tack and cross in not too long, but in a pretty good position to corral the whole fleet over towards the beach. So the next thing we'll do is we can see, this is a screenshot of what the course looks like off the line and how close that shoreline is. It was only 3 or 4 minutes, 4 minutes maybe off the line before you had to tack because of shallow water. So we'll let this play, and this is sort of steps us through the beat, and you can see how the boats progress up the beat to a certain point where boats start to become stronger and stronger. So we all tack, and now Cam's done a nice job of positioning us to the kind of leeward and ahead of the group, sailing up towards the righty. And now we can see the guys from the right coming in quite strong from the right-hand side. And it's quite impressive how much those guys have gained out there on the right-hand side after being behind. But we do a nice job here. Cam does good work of sticking to the plan that top right's going to be pretty strong. Let it keep playing out.
So you can sort of see the ley lines through the beach there. I think one of the things too is the two guys in the right, they actually never went all the way into the right. They couldn't, they got bounced back at it. They started getting light, and they actually did 2 little chips out. But they never actually went all the way into the right. So they never really showed how strong that right really was. And so none of us really had a true indication on the effect that right really would play later on in the race.
So we'll keep letting it play out, but the top right really comes in good. I mean, as we were pretty close to even with the groups that were just off our windward hip, now we start to make some gains here in this top right. And it's now just us and 12 that are still going to the right side, and then we both tack, and we're able to come across and cross everybody except for 19. So 19 comes up and is able to tack and get around ahead of the group.
So one little thing here is, you know, when you're sort of formulating your plan, you know, the first part of the beat is all about holding your position and giving yourself an opportunity to be free and try and execute any sort of plan in the last third. In the last third, this particular race was pretty key because we were able to sail our own race, get in phase in the shift, and then work out towards where we thought the top right would be the strongest place coming in. And a lot of the other guys, they were getting controlled by each other and having to do unnecessary tacks. And as we know, over 20 knots, that's pretty expensive. So anyway, you know, we can progress as we go because this next part's quite interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note here as well that, you know, decision making for rounding the mark, you know, the lay here, if everybody saw where the mark location was, partly that looks like it's downwind of where everybody turned is because we have a 3 mark system in the 52 class where there's a 3rd mark to leeward of the windward mark that keeps people from tacking in at the mark from port tack. So it's a keep away buoy basically that you have to round the port both upwind and downwind, and it keeps that tacking in at the zone. Basically doesn't allow it to happen, which is quite nice. So that's a nice feature for umpires and for the teams. But anyway, also the other interesting one is that where the race committee set this top mark, there was only about 1 meter of water on keels and not much room to the beach. The surf break here, basically. So we're pretty risky in terms of how close we were to the beach. Up the feet, we've got a little test here, quick test of the starboard and the port tack of the beat. And on the starboard tack versus platoon, we lost 38 meters of them because we were working on, if you can see in the top, the average hog and sog. We were sailing slightly on the blue boat. We were sailing a little bit lower than them. They were sailing a bit higher, and we were converging, but we were trying to stay forward and stay strong with them with that group. And then on the port tack, we again still lost some meters by trying to sail a little bit higher than them while they were going faster. But still, even given all that, we still round ahead of them because of what we were doing was motoring the boat well up that beat to be in a good position for that next section of the race at the top.
So what a little bit of this tells us, and we can look into it after the racing, is, you know, coming off the line, it was very even for about 65 to 75% of the starboard, and it was only in the last sort of 10-15% that they started gaining, and really gained suddenly at the end of that starboard tack. And that's about the time that we chose to get out and try and get bearing back the other way on what was now the long tack. And so on this port tack, at times we could see platoons sharing up off us, and there's a line of pressure. So we're sort of more on a higher, slower mode, trying to get up to them, to that pressure, and try and have a chance to sort of be an equal breeze. But at some point you have to start putting the bow down and go for the next shift. And so that changing from one mode to the other is quite key. And sometimes we can pick up those trends on where we missed that opportunity to change mode soon enough, or we did it in the right time. So there's a lot that we will take out of this, and we can dig in, and with platoon especially, we can get more numbers out of it. With all the other boats, you only get the cog and sog.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's an interesting one that we can pick out, and we have a few more of these tests throughout the race here that we can show. But this is again part of that NORD analytics, that we can pull out these pieces of the race and look at the different data points that we want to select, and it makes it quite helpful for analyzing things after the race. So here, coming into the top mark, this is a drone footage of the top mark rounding. We can see how it all played out, and the video of how we set ourselves up for the run. And Cam can talk us through a little bit of what he was thinking as we were going through, and I can pause it as we go too here, Cam. This is Quantum coming in from the left of the screen, the windward of the Phoenix.
So right there, I just said I'm thinking of jibing out of the top mark as the initial plan, early enough for the guys just to start thinking about the possibilities of what we're going to do.
This is that black mark. This is the inner mark that we call the inner windward mark. So you have to honor that one. So that keeps people from tacking in right in the zone of the top mark.
So as we're closing in, we get a huge header, and we're all going into a really fine mode. You can see the guys behind the three boats. You got Platoon to Windward, Azura below, Brenonasac. They're all really struggling here to get up to the mark. So coming in here, you know, Michaeli's talked to me a little bit earlier in the leg and said, "Hey Cam, there's not a lot of room beyond the offset mark." So big part of our plan was, yeah, we liked the right, and there was a huge righty at the top. We thought that was the way to go, but also our decision making was based on, stop the video here, Tom. Our decision making was also based on the fact that we were really sort of worried about the depth and the distance to get, a set and jibe in. One thing to note is Mark Legess is a navigator on Phoenix. They're sort of the local knowledge. Mark's house actually was about 300 meters from the mark, so he knew exactly where to go and what to do. But we weren't prepared to take kind of the risks that he was happy to take in that sense, or he just knew the situation a bit better than what we were comfortable with.
So you just called an Indian here. Can you explain what an Indian is and how we're setting the boat up on the offset here?
Yeah, well, an Indian is just a code name that's come from a long history with Team New Zealand, I guess. Some of the guys probably can comment better on that, but it's basically calling a jibe set. So our kite's always set up drop to port and hoisted to port, obviously. So it just means that it's defining the maneuver of jibing around the offset mark, and what's involved with that. The team will knows then what processes they need to go to and how we go about it. One of the big priorities here, I'd say, just as we round the mark, and Ed knows exactly what's going on, but you always have to sort of try and remind of some of the priorities, and obviously make sure we stay clear of Phoenix, because obviously we're overlapped. We're in a position that if we do get sort of locked or trapped, we get stuck going with them.
If they decide not to do a jibe set, then we have to go straight with them if we're stuck to windward.
Yeah, so we sort of sacrifice a little bit to gain that opportunity to get clear. So as it plays, you'll sort of see how we go about free.
Opening gauge here.
And another part of being high on the offset and knowing you're doing an Indian is just like rounding the bottom mark wide and tight. We want to come out stepped up on the next guy who's a leg ray, and already have that jump slightly out and above their wake, and not allow guys to get strong on us on our windward quarter.
Yeah, exactly. And then the one other risk that we have to be very careful of that you start talking about here with Ed is to make sure that platoon doesn't get overlapped inside of us and have room at the offset mark.
So as it turns out, a majority of the fleet all came with, and Phoenix, who went straight, they ended up losing out. We went straight, we ended up losing. So the decision to jibe became quite an important one, and certainly we all of us sort of got a big jump on the fleet.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note too that the wind speed had dropped down quite a bit here because we're so close to shore, and that there is a top end limit to an Indian. So we're already close to it when we're in the 23s, 24s, or even above it. And we got lucky and it got a little bit softer just before the mark. Plus, with the first set, the spinnaker is still all zipped up and ready to go and nice and clean and everything, which makes a big difference too. So as usual, there's a bit of a split where the boats behind choose to go a different way, which makes sense. They get some clear water. Phoenix 12 comes back and jives to Leeward of the group, hoping that they're in good shape for the next time we get together. So this sets up now. We're going down the run, and we are now set up and going, ripping. This is, a couple of minutes after the top mark, and we're having a good run here. We're following Allegre, and we've got platoon right behind us, and platoon's doing a great job of keeping the pressure on. They're in a tough spot, seeing as they're in the wake of our boat, but they're doing a really nice job of sailing the boat fast and keeping the boat ripping and keeping the pressure on. So any mistake from us is going to be pretty costly. In this much breeze, obviously, it's really important to nail all these maneuvers and to execute really well, because a boat right behind that's pushing like that can definitely make your life difficult. We'll go through this one a little bit.
I've just said one and in. So, we approached the top mark. We're looking at about 2 minutes 30 on port here, and about 3 minutes 30 back on starboard. So it was a little bit of a quick run in the sense of maybe 6 minutes to the bottom. So I'm already, it's breezy, it's top end, and you really feel it's a top end. I mean, we're scooting along here. So the decisions have to be made early, and have to be made where you're trying to limit the risk that you might have to do a secondary maneuver close to the bottom and put the team and the crew under a lot of extra strain. And you know, this is a pretty high pressure situation, and you know, sailing the boat on its mode and just relying on the guys to just let the boat do the work and then make the right decision, and getting that jibing placement was, as you see, an interesting decision once it plays.
It's also interesting to note too about how important it is to get that position right, because if we do miss the ley line the wrong anyway, really there's not much of an opening in the groove in this much breeze. We just capsize if we try and sail too high, and you go 5 knots slower if you bear away. So it's pretty important to nail it pretty well.
So we're inside 30. That's you know, for your perfect ley line, and you know, you've got 26, 27 knots of breeze right now, and ripping along. So it's a lot can change between this jibe placement and getting to the bottom mark. You know, so one of the big things here is, you know, we partly match platoon. They're just slightly ahead of us, but the precision that goes into racing these boats at any point, or racing and especially in the breeze, is pretty key. And you know, one little bit early, a little bit late on the sheet, or a little bit of a pigtail on platoon, and the kite sheet burns through their chute, and the next thing that's their race. So it's just so many little subtleties that come into this. As we play, you'll see what happens.
Yeah, this highlights that execution of doing things well, doing all the steps right. And you know, these guys are amazing sailors in the platoon, and there was a little mistake, and from what we understand, the kite sheet got a little bit of a knot in it.
You know, so the realities of sailboat racing, you know, just this, anything can take place on the course, and you know, every little error can certainly amount to a big problem.
Yeah.
So now we're already starting to see that you know, we're pretty comfortable on ley line, and we're trying to mode the boat. Ed's just doing a really good job to just keep us fast. We know we've got an intersection potentially with 12 coming here, so it's all about just trying to get across them as fast as we can. And now that we're, you know, platoon's not a worry.
So this is, again, picking up a couple of tests. This is a test of us versus platoon on that port jibe out of the top mark. And you can see that, you know, we gained 13 meters on them total, but not a whole lot. So over that like 6-minute test, I think it was, we were averaging 21 knots, which is pretty quick. And we gained a little bit. Mostly that's going to be because they're in our wake down that side. So both boats were sailing quite well, but to reinforce a little bit of how painful it is to have a mistake, and to just make everyone realize and force this with our team, and to get our guys to remember all those little things make a big difference. If you look at after the jibe, when they broke their spinnaker, in just 2 minutes, 15 seconds, we gained 425 meters. So one small little thing turns into a big loss. So those sorts of things can happen to anybody, and it's part of the reason why it's just so important, especially on a breezy day, to just keep the pressure on the boats in front of you, and keep the hammer down, and keep going, and keep it fast, but also be planning ahead like Cam was doing before this jibe. You know, we're already talking about what mark rounding at the leeward mark, what side, which way we wanted to go up the next beat, really making sure that the team is informed so that there's no surprises. And that's when you have surprises is when the bad things can happen. And so if we keep everybody informed, keep the pressure on, keep going fast, but not take unnecessary risks, you can eke out lots of gains. And as much as we try and do lots of things to gain a half a meter or a meter on a race, when you just have one mistake that costs you 425 meters, it's pretty painful. And it was a tough moment for those guys, but platoon did a great job of grinding back in the race and doing quite well in the race in the end, actually.
So In this shot here, you can see the difference in what we gained on Phoenix 12 out of the difference in the approach to our maneuvers at the top. And like Tom talked about, my goal as a tactician in this sort of conditions is to limit opportunities for risk, make good decisions, make them early enough to allow opportunities to arrive in your lap. It's sort of create your own luck. And one of the big things is we'd talked about, okay, the right's definitely strong. We're talking on the run about how we approach that, how we want to come in. We want to keep the maneuvers down. Risks of jibing at the gate in the high 20s are, a risk you don't need to. So thinking one and in right turn, very simple, very basic, and get on the other tack out of the mark and start protecting the right. As we sort of progress down here, you'll see how things sort of unfold and what sacrifices people go to take the easy option of the right turn.
Yeah, and it's important to say that one of the things that Cam was talking about on this run before the jibe was that it was right at the top but left at the bottom. And so that was being factored in by Michele and Cameron in their ley line decision. But they're also very, very hesitant to jibe too early and end up having to do an extra jibe at the end of the run. So what ended up happening is we did end up actually overstanding slightly. But since we were, after the jibe, you notice that we were slightly to windward of Allegre's line, and that presented a really nice opportunity. So that, again, that's that point of keeping the pressure on the boat in front of you for them to allowing other teams to make mistakes if we can keep the pressure on. So we can see how this plays out here. We're quite hot coming in here, a little bit pressed up getting in there because it's a bit of a lefty.
Yeah, it's a lefty with breeze, so it's both. It's a quite a big effect on your ley lines when you get that extra couple of knots and you get the lefty. And we'd been told and we'd talked about that whole geographical left at the bottom, right at the top, and our plan was to go around this mark and tack straight away.
And you can see here in the video that this is the left-hand gate mark and the right-hand gate mark is way up here. So it's quite a ways up there, a little bit overstood, and that presents a nice opportunity here.
So we're just confirming that we're still happy with right, and we're going to push it with Allegre. So as we, approach this mark, it's, I'm thinking, instead of, I'm leading the race, instead of tacking out straight away, I'm going to follow and just match Allegre here. Burnham is sitting in fourth. She's prepared to take a little bit more of a risk on her rounding and to actually pull off that jibe and be the lead boat going right from the left gate. So come around, you can sort of see that I'm like, in a 185 true wind direction, 186. I'm starting to think, oh, this is kind of a right number for down here. I'll just be patient and wait for it to shift back. I think, it's easy enough just to start being a little bit too cautious in your approach. And, Tom will always ask and did ask the question, why we didn't, commit and tack straight away to the plan, which ultimately turned into being a mistake, and we lose Burnham and we let 12 get very close to us.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that if you look at the screenshot here in front of us, the plan going in was always to go around the mark and tack. But as Cameron said, a few different factors led them to change their plan, and they decided to stay on starboard for a bit longer. You can see the track where they stayed on starboard on the green track for a couple minutes and then matched Allegre when they tacked. And what it did, it allowed 12, 7, 3, and then there's another boat out to Leeward and ahead of boat 12 in the track there. That's Burnham. Their tracker wasn't working that day. So it allowed those guys to get to the right, and Burnham was able to get around. So I mean, those things happen, and it was obviously, in hindsight, it's a mistake, but there were good reasons for why they did it. And you know, to be able to still be coming out at second at the top mark is all good. And you know, risk management wise, it was nice not to round the jibe around that left mark, and 26 knots of wind to throw it around a 2-sail jibe without the spinnaker up is quite a lot of load in the rig, and quite easy to potentially have a mistake. So all in all, it was, you know, all worked out quite well. A little bit disappointing to lose one boat, but these are the things that happen. But at least we were able to consolidate and stick in front of the rest of the group, which was good.
One of the big things, you know, is a way for anyone just thinking about how you approach your tactics. And when you do have some instruments, is you're always trying to update your plan. You're always thinking about what you've got at your fingertips or what you've seen on the race course, and continually update and rethink things. Obviously, you know, I decided that I was within sort of 2-3 degrees of my max right at 188. I'd sort of seen 191, 192 on the previous beat as my max right. So I'm thinking, oh, I'm already in a right phase. I'm already in that right number. But what didn't really pay attention to was there's a little bit of clearing on the right side of the course. The line that Tom had shown you earlier, that was along that freighter, that had moved a little bit further out. So that had meant the right, we're maybe seeing even a little bit more right hand than what we thought. So everything had ratcheted sort of 10 degrees further right. And what became what I thought was right numbers were actually left numbers.
Yeah, exactly. There was a bit of a shift in the progression of the day. As the day wore on, it was just getting a little bit more right strong, and we just sort of missed an opportunity here a little bit. But you know, again, it's good to continue talking about things and continue updating the plan as we're racing.
And it's always tough to you know, to chase the fourth guy when you got two first and second sort of stacked up behind you. But the reality is, you know, we had a good plan going in, and we just didn't sort of stick with it.
Yeah.
Cam, you talk a bit about the numbers that you're seeing on the boat. And on the previous display here, we saw that there are a bunch of numbers on the right-hand side. Are those mirrored for what you're actually viewing? And can you just step through those pretty quickly for us?
Correct. So that's we can put Tom is able to put any number on the screen that we want that's logged within the boat's computer system. So obviously you can see the top one is boat speed, then we go down to target. So head's pretty much on target here. SOG is something that we don't really reference, but we reference it when we post check, because all the other boats that we're checking against, we can only check their SOG. The true wind direction, the TWD 188, that's my big number. And then heading, which is below that, is 219. So those are the two numbers that I check in a lot. Ed is, you know, boat speed, target, and heel, which is down at the bottom. We're at 25 degrees of heel. I don't think he really uses true wind angle that much to reference, but that's the one that says -37. That means we're on port tack. And you know, we can have anything up there, rudder, any forestay, whatever we want, we can put in there to check against later to say, well, the actual numbers said that it was this. Gives us a good representation of looking back and seeing what the reality was. Like I say, true wind direction and heading are they normally stack one on top of the other for me, and that's the ones I rely on. Often I might call 0.2 faster than posted or target, which is 9.5. If I say 0.2, we're obviously hoping Ed and Warwick are going to get us up to 9.7s. And that's for a moting tool on a shift. If it's you know, a little bit left and I really want to get right in a hurry, I might go 0.3 above and just say I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of gauge just to get my bow forward of bearing on the other guys on the right.
I think it's important to note too that we are able to log all kinds of information on the boat, and you know, like Cam says, it helps take a lot of the guesswork out of when we're debriefing. You know, when the guys, well, I think we were at this, you know, this runner load or jib car position or mast butt position. We log all of that stuff: jib car, mast butt, shroud tensions, all kinds of information that we log, and we can put it up on the screen and show the guys as they're maneuvering and as they're racing around the course, all of that info. For the purposes of this presentation, we wanted to kind of limit it a little bit and have the numbers be nice and big, because when we stack all the numbers that we put on there normally, they get pretty small and hard to read. So we tried to keep it simple for this presentation, but anything that you log on a boat can be put up on the screen. And that also goes for even more simple boats that with this player, you can use even just the lat long and information that you get out of a Velocitech or a speed puck or anything that records your position while you're sailing, and have your boat speed and heading at least up on the screen to sync along with your video that you might take from a coach boat or from on board.
And one of the great things with the relationship we have with Platoon is we can actually have the same displays of their boat being read at the same time next to ours, and put them up at the same time, which can be really helpful in tight situations. And then we talk backwards and forwards, and we try and help each other improve and figure out ways that, you know, obviously the boats are a little bit different because they come out of two different design offices and have slightly different characteristics and certain breezes, but at the same time, we've built up enough of a relationship and spent the time over the years sharing everything that you know where each other's strengths and weaknesses lie because of this.
Okay, to move on here, we're just looking at the data on how we sailed this beat. This is a test on the port tack versus Alegre, and we basically stayed exactly even with them. We lost 1 meter in theory on this whole test on port tack, so quite even. We're both in the same piece of water. But then the other one, if you see Phoenix 12, who tacked earlier around the leeward mark, they start sailing into that righty at the end. You can see how their track turns down, and they gained 25 meters on us during that section of the race just from sailing into that righty and sailing their boat well as well, obviously. But it's again, it's nice to be able to get this empirical evidence to be able to prove what was happening on the race course pretty definitively without having any guesswork come into it, which is really nice. So setting up the top mark here, Cam, you want to talk through this one and we'll show the video of this top mark?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we're coming in, we're, you know, obviously have lost Burnham, and as you can see, you know, it's a massive righty, so it's 205. We had up to 209, I think, on this beat, which is what really gave Burnham the opportunity to get round us. It's pretty clear that we want to jibe around the mark, but as we're approaching and the whole way in, it's been upper 20s. And so we're pretty happy we're in second. We're pretty happy that we can try for the safe maneuver. So I had a barroway set and jibe is a pretty high percentage safe maneuver. And as you see, the effects and the consequences of a small mistake, that snowball can really change your day.
Yeah, so we had a bit of a snowball start up here. We'll let it play and then we can talk through that a little bit. Got a little scary. This is Burnham coming around the mark now.
So you can hear I just had a 100% set and priority jibe. So the guys know that that's set, and strip the halyard off the winch and be ready for a jibe. So we were thinking of not taking the risk here and just playing it safe. But as we come in here, there's, it's 28 knots. It's, at this particular moment, it's way too risky in our minds to take that risk. Rip and a shoot, twisting in the head stay, any number of things. So anyway, we go for a set.
Yeah, so go for a set, just a bear away, and then into an early jibe with the, you notice that the kite's not zipped up. We don't send somebody down below during the upwind leg to zip the kite, so it kind of goes up 30, as they call it.
So we end up having not a great set. We're at a fairly high angle, shoot shy of the top. And this is sort of the snowball. And this is where me personally, I make a mistake. You learn, but the importance of precision, the importance of knowing that everyone's got a job on board and they're going to is quite important. And so anyway, keep playing, Tommy.
Yeah. It takes quite a while to get the ground up that last bit when it's full load in the kite. So that just slows everybody's movement down on the boat a bit.
So everyone's moving, everyone's still sort of out of position. We don't have the weight on the rail, but Ed's doing a nice job of trucking us along. So we go into the jibe here. I think I've got to do a job that I don't normally do, and that's jibe the jib, which gets me a little bit late onto the runner. And I pick up the tail of the runner, so the very narrow bit, and wrap that in the winch, and that causes further snowball out of the jibe. Nearly very risky. Managed to pull it off. We do a nice job of the jibe and get going. As you can see here, he's flapping around a bit while I sort catch back up on the runner. So, what seemed to be the safe play ended up, sort of biting us in the ass a little bit, just through just a couple of things that sort of, like Tom said, snowball and keep sort of going down the line.
Yeah, I think it's an important one that we really reinforce a lot on the team, is to make sure we're trusting everybody around us to do their jobs well. And and Cam was trying to help out by jibing the jib, but the guys, they had an alternate plan on how to sort it out, even though the guy that normally is next to him doing it wasn't there. So, and it didn't turn into a major issue, and everything works out fine, but it's definitely a little bit scary to have the head stay moving around that much out of a jibe and 28 knots of breeze. So definitely the rig was pretty loose. Thank God for swept back spreaders, a pretty nice feature right now. So all good, no issues, back up and ripping. We can see the view of the other boats in a minute here, and it all works out quite well. There's the Burnham leading, and then there's the next Rex boats back here. So
one of the things was we did set in quite a nice line of breeze that we were able to follow down the race course. It wasn't as split as it was on the run before. So we actually stay in a breeze and actually hold our position on 12 quite nicely. Yeah, it works out pretty well, the call of it. And, one of the things that did change too that we didn't mention is that the race committee moved the windward mark slightly. They made it slightly shorter, which got the mark a bit further offshore, which gave you a little bit more room on starboard and made it so it wasn't as critical to do the jibe set up there. So that made that was a contributing factor in the decision-making process there as well. So now we're on the long jibe. We're behind Burnham, but we're to leeward and ahead of the rest of the fleet. So it's a pretty nice place to be. Pretty happy. Yeah, so now it's just sort of more of a not put another foot wrong and play the high percentage plays all the way to the finish and hope that maybe the boat in front makes a mistake and you don't, and you get a chance at them. But otherwise, it's just hold your position and not any critical mistakes.
Yeah, it'd be a mistake to push anything too hard right now. So the guys have done a nice job here, being in that position that they are to leeward and ahead to leeward of the Burnham means that if those guys make a mistake boat handling wise, or if they miss the lay line, or many different things that could happen, that if we keep the pressure on, you could pass them. But that didn't happen. You can see the tracker here coming in at the end, a little screenshot of just about to cross the finish line, doing 23 knots of boat speed. Burnham already finished, and we're to leeward and ahead of the rest of the group to come in for a second place. So it's a pretty successful race for tough conditions and a tough location, and full credit to the guys for doing a good job and Cameron for keeping the risks level low and sailing the boat well around the track. I think we wanted to bring up our email addresses in case anybody wanted to email us and talk to us, and maybe we can field some questions a bit here too.
Great. Yeah. So we actually have a couple of questions that have already come in. Two of the same one, which is regarding the value of the port tack prevention buoy at the top of the course. Is that it's the first that I've seen of it for sure, and just wondering if you guys see value in that as the fleet, or if there's and if you would recommend that for any other one designs.
Yeah, I think that I'll take that for a second, but Cam can chime in. But yeah, it's been really good. It's something that it's used now in the 52 class and also in the RC44 class. And it's quite a nice feature. It keeps that that problem of people tacking in inside the zone. That keeps it from happening, which is really nice. So you can tack to leeward of a boat, and then you've got to sail for 4 or 5 lengths on starboard before you're around the mark. And it just cuts down the traffic a little bit. It separates the boats a little bit before the top mark. But the other nice feature is with boats, fleets like this, with the 52 and the 44, where there's umpiring, it gives a safe area for the umpires to operate. So the umpires can be in there with their umpire boats and not have the risk of being run over. It takes a little bit of risk away for them as well. And one thing to add is that in the 44 class, the class only uses 2 buoys. So the inner windward mark and the outer windward mark, and there's no traditional offset mark. So you're setting your spinnaker right at the top mark. And that's a little easier for race committees because there's still only 2 top marks to set, just like you would at a with an offset. But it means you're setting right at the top mark. So there's 2 different ways to think about it. The 52s have 3 marks up at the top.
Great, thanks. Another question regarding the, are you guys still using the V-spar system to reference sail shapes?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that that Brett and Owen work on really regularly. You know, during the warm-ups, the chase boat can be following them behind, and they can actually view what our sail shapes are and help give comments. We can view the different cambers and have our percentages of what the sails should look like, and Andy on the runners can view that if he wants to wear a PDA. So no, it's really been beneficial to us in the development of the sails, and just the development of how we use and trim the sails during the racing for different moments on the race course. Sort of know what your target percentages that you're aiming for, and then Brett can go back and analyze it after the race and just check in on things.
Great. We've certainly seen today how important the comms are, especially in these higher wind conditions. The questions coming up about what sort of cameras are you using on board, and are you guys mic'd up across the boat?
So what we're doing is we've got, you know, the view you're looking at now is a GoPro, and then the drone is just a normal DJI drone or whatever. But the other piece that we have is Cam in his pocket. I just give him a little voice recorder, a digital voice recorder in a waterproof pouch. And so it's just in his foul weather gear pocket. So that's why the audio is not fantastic that comes off the boat, but it does give us an idea and really helpful for analyzing the race afterwards. So it's a little bit muffled. It's not great, but you can hear what's happening. And, you know, it's not broadcast quality. So I apologize to all of you that just had to sit through all of it. But it is really an interesting part of it. And to try and get audio off of the cameras themselves is really difficult. So that's part of the thing that's so nice about this player from Nord, is that we can combine the audio, the video, and the data all into one place. And it's all really easy to put together. It used to take me 2 hours to make a 15-minute video from a race day, splicing everything together and then creating a movie. Now I just take everything, dump it all into the player. It's all time synced up because I make sure the times are correct on the voice recorder and all the cameras every morning. And then it just gets put together like this, and I can skip ahead and back and find any pieces of information that we want. It's quite helpful.
Spectacular. Great. Thanks. So a question here from Giles Van Grusen is, what are the most valuable metrics to track in these performance analytics? And how do you see smaller club racing programs beginning to take advantage of this kind of analysis?
I'll take that one again too. I think that, you know, it depends on the boat, but obviously, you know, boat speed and heading are a huge part of it. And I think if you know, if you were in a club racing situation, we're able to track your position and track your boat speed and your heading. And if you could do, especially if you could have a training partner or multiple boats on the race course, you could really put together a lot of information about who's sailing the boat well, what's happening on the race course by just analyzing the tracks and seeing how the boats bend in their tracks in different areas of the race courses from wind shifts, and how how people are tacking. We can analyze the tacks and tack loss and jibe loss, and all those things come from this software, and it's quite a helpful thing to be able to have benchmarks for everything, and helpful as well for the guys on the water. You know, Cameron can know how much it's going to lose an attack or a jibe and different wind strengths because we analyze it so much, and he can help. It helps him plan his race course, I think. Cam, do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, to answer stepping down to different levels, you know, we've got access to so many different tools and pieces of data, and the analytics can be to a hugely advanced level. But in the club races sense, as long as you're able to get any little bit of information out of your system, you can get sometimes these data loggers for that very inexpensive, and you just need your speed and your headings and true wind direction, true wind speed, and you've got enough information to throw it all in. And like Tom said, the cameras and everything that's involved is we all are using anyway in many cases. But the value that this has added and the way that you look at things, you know, it highlights everything, and it just helps us continually improve and make better decisions. Try to limit those mistakes on the race course that can be obviously very costly at times.
Great. Farley Fontenot is asking, Tom, do you typically debrief the night of the race or the next morning?
Yeah, C1. I like Coach
Well,
One.
that's always debated, right?
It's a tough debate. I'm a big fan of trying to close the day with everything that happens in the day, and it's been a tough one with the quantum racing guys because they usually don't debrief in the evenings in the previous seasons. But I've been trying to bring some evening debriefs in, and that sort of closes the day out, finishes it off. Everybody goes to have some dinner and goes to bed, and then we can start the next day fresh. It's can be contentious sometimes when you start the morning talking about mistakes that were made the day before. So I'm personally a fan of doing it in the evenings prior to dinner. And that's what's so nice about a system like this is it is quick. And previously it was hard to be ready for a debrief in the evening. And now there's a lot more information available, and the ability to have a debrief straight away is a lot easier.
And basically Tom will ask a few of us on the race on the boat, and then he'll have been looking at the race and he'll see some key moments that he wants to you know, reinforce with us, and just be sure that the process was followed in the way that we came to some of these decisions or went about things. And obviously we can't hide, you know, today and this particular race, the microphone's hard to hear, but on the lighter air days it's clear as bell. You can hear everybody on board, so it's really hard to escape and to hide about anything that's said or done.
What I like.
It makes total sense. And I guess at the end of the day, it's as long as the system works for 90% of the time, for sure.
Yeah, you can't bag the coach either because he's always listening.
Great. All right. Well, that looks like the end of the questions that we have today. So just want to say, Cameron, thank you. And Tom, thank you for joining us. And thank you to our viewers for tuning in. If you guys want to see more from these guys in quantum racing, be sure to check them out. The link's in the live description. And as Tom has nicely posted here, there's also their emails that he shared. If you guys have enjoyed today's session, please support our efforts to build a community of active and engaged sailors through the Starboard Portal by purchasing or renewing your U.S. Sailing membership. We have a lot of great content coming up on the schedule, and thanks to U.S. Sailing members, we're able to adapt and evolve to better serve sailors and with content like this. Visit us at the link in the description to join or renew your U.S. Sailing membership today. Thanks again, and have a great afternoon.